Wow. Okay, great. And then also joining us, we have a couple of special guests. One is Kim Price. Kim recently completed his Chester Fair Path to Zero Waste project. Really, the goal is to, over the course of the next few years, to move the entire Chester Fair toward a zero waste structure. And he ran a very successful campaign. He's been generous enough to be willing to share his perspective on his campaign. Kim, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm Kim Price with the Chester Fair. I'm a vice president on the board of directors, and the whole zero waste campaign is something we had investigated years ago, but pursuing Joseph's help and Sustainable CT, we actually made it happen.
Great, perfect, thank you. And then also we have Katie. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Katie. I would butcher it. Owsley.
You got it.
Woo, woo, I'm batting 100 today. It won't happen again. But Katie was one of the organizers and helped lead the Mayfair food waste program. They just recently completed their crowdfunding campaign. She's a part of Planet New Canaan. And if you would introduce yourself, Katie.
Sure, and I see Mickey Porta on as well, who also works with Planet New Canaan. So we partnered with St. Mark's Church. They host a big Mayfair event every year in New Canaan, and they worked with us, and we were lucky enough to work with Sustainable Connecticut to make that fully compostable event this year. So that was fantastic. It was great to work with Cameron. She had great suggestions to make our fundraising efforts more productive, I think, and it was very well received by the community. And in fact, another organization has used some of the equipment that we created to work on some more, to have more community events be compostable. So that's been a great start for us.
Awesome, awesome. So just so we can get a sense of who is on the call, if you would just raise your hand or click, the hand raise icon when I'm going to ask a couple questions. If this defines you, you have participated in a Sustainable CT crowdfunding campaign in the past. Katie, Kim, I can't see you.
Yep. Sorry about that. Yep.
Okay. Katie, great. And Marjorie, awesome, great. This is your first time hearing about the Sustainable CT process and campaign. You're completely new. You've never heard of us before. Great, awesome, Kaylee, great. And you have heard about Sustainable CT and you've heard about our program, but you have not run a campaign yet. Great, okay, perfect. We have a really great diversity of folks on this call. This is perfect. So the way this will kind of run is we're going to I'm going to just give a very brief overview of the Sustainable CT program, just so that we can kind of set a level playing field. I'll give Cameron a little bit of space to share as well because of her background and experience guiding people through setting up their page and running their campaign. Cameron and I, just to give you an understanding, Cameron and I really try to tag team this process and try to stay really closely in sync with each other so that we know everything about what's going on in campaigns, and we're making sure that we're, as the sort of Connecticut person, I'm seeing and able to help manage resources and get people aligned in the Connecticut space, and Cameron is really focused on that online and also on the strategy behind what it takes to make a campaign successful. So we work really closely together. And to, ultimately we all want everyone who comes into the Sustainable CT program to ultimately be successful. So let me open up a page here, and I will just share briefly about the overview and structure. Feel free to ask me to pause and ask me questions, but we're going to leave a big chunk of time to ask questions at the end. Once I've kind of given a brief overview, Cameron will give a brief overview. I have some questions that I'll ask to Kim and Katie as kind of folks that have run campaigns here before. Again, feel free to ask questions that come up for you, and then we'll save large majority of the hour for Q&A and getting feedback. So let me just open up a screen share. All right, can folks see that little presentation document that I have up? All right, so Sustainable CT as a program has been around for about 2 years. Initially, we started off in a slightly different structure, and we've refined our structure a bit over the past couple of years to really...
Sorry, Joseph, can you just put it on a presentation view?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Does that seem a little bit better for folks? Sure. So Sustainable CT started up a couple years ago, and it has been really designed around supporting project leaders all around the state of Connecticut in starting projects that are aligned in sort of 4 focus areas. We have what we call civic pride and engagement, which are all of the things that you may think of about what makes a community and a neighborhood a place that you would consider a high quality place to live, which are art projects, community festivals, murals, things at your park, arts, and all those kinds of events. So very broad topic. The second area would be our Social Change Amplifier Fund, which is focused on communities of color and project leaders of color who are thinking about how to lead work that ultimately will lead to significant social change. Third area is our conversation today, composting. And then fourth is looking at projects that are related to climate and energy. I'll give a little bit more information on all of those in a moment. So these numbers are actually quite a bit outdated. We have almost nearly 10,000 people who have made some form of an individual contribution to a project, and that's just with the time that we've been with Patronicity. We've collectively put close to $2.5 million into community organizations all across Connecticut. A little bit more, we've put about half of that is Sustainable CT, and about half is community contributions. Actually, a little bit more is community contributions because several campaigns, Katie and Kim, for example, actually raised more than their goal through this process. And so we're really successful in their process. There are 2 sides of the house. You don't really need to know too much of this, but basically to participate in a sustainable CT or to lead a Sustainable CT campaign, you need to be it has to be in a town that is registered with Sustainable CT. To date, that means that most towns across Connecticut have registered with Sustainable CT or have pursued some form of certification with Sustainable CT. But that, you don't have to worry about that on your end. If you're interested in starting a project, come talk to me and we'll figure out kind of all of those details. Again, kind of over 200 projects have happened across the state of Connecticut. So, all the way from, Putnam and Pomfret down to Bridgeport, over to Westernly and Stonington, up into Canaan. We've had projects all across the state, all different types of projects in those 4 categories. And so it's really exciting to see the amount of energy and interest that people have in sustainable CT projects and kind of how it all works. Again, I mentioned the number of donors that have contributed to sustainable CT, and those donors are from all over the country and all over the world. You know, I think it didn't fit on this map, but we actually have a contributor or 2, I think, in Australia and maybe New Zealand even. So, you know, getting the Aussie crowd involved as well. But it's great because I think a lot of folks sometimes think the Community Match Fund has to be dollars that you raise specifically from individuals in your town or in your immediate community, and that's not the case. You can actually raise funds from anyone, anywhere around the world, and people will get behind local projects, but really it's a matter of people are often given to the project and to the project leader. So part of the success strategy is really being willing to make some phone calls, send some personal emails, and people will give in response to that. The sustainable CT process, we really try to keep all of our funding fast, flexible, and easy. We really make things super simple. You know, there are no application deadlines. We don't have a formal standardized proposal. Everything starts in conversation. The lengthiest part of the process is probably filling out the campaign page. But in many cases, folks have already put a lot of work into thinking about their campaign and thinking about their project and what they want to do. And so this can be a way of, it's really, the Patronicity website is great at giving you a resource in a single place that you can direct people to find out about your campaign, to find out about your information, and ultimately to give to the project itself. You know, no one size fits all. Everything is really kind of like in the relationship building and process of getting us, making your project successful. So what is crowdfunding and how is it structured? It's structured as essentially a one-to-one match between sustainable CT and the dollars that you raise within your campaign and within your budget. What you get from sustainable CT is promotional and marketing support. And then you get a lot of coaching from me, and you also get a ton of coaching from Cameron, who's not only working with sustainable CT, but also working with other crowdfunding projects all around the Northeast. So she's got a lot of perspective and informs me a lot about what other states and other places are doing to be successful. Next one. So again, kind of like what's eligible, projects that, as long as the project is in a town that's registered with sustainable CT, aligns with our action roadmap, we can take a look at that later on if you have any questions about it. But generally speaking, the action roadmap is very broad and is really tries to reflect what are the best things that communities and community leaders are doing. Has a public benefit and is inclusive of the community. So it's not a targeted, I'd like to raise funds for the compost project in my backyard, but I'd like to raise funds for the compost project that is happening in our public garden. That would work. And then there's some technicalities around sort of minimum numbers of donors, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And then again, sort of pretty broad eligibility criteria. All of this information is also on our website. So we've got these 4 funding areas. I talked about that a little bit earlier, just to kind of introduce the concept of our different categories. And today we're just talking about this Compost Amplifier Fund. That's really been generously supported and set up by one of our funders who really recognizes how critical the waste crisis is, and compost is one of the primary ways to really address some of our waste crisis. And then we'll talk about kind of just this campaign around the compost. So it's a $15,000 max. It's a one-to-one match, $7,500 from community contributions and $7,500 from sustainable CT. And up to 35% of any one contribution is eligible for a full match from sustainable CT. Again, don't worry about too many of the technicalities. Just want to get this information passed along in a way that people can start to get a sense of what all of this works. So with that, I think I'll pause there. Cameron, do you want to introduce sort of the patronicity side of things and kind of how that structure works and kind of provide a little bit of overview there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to share my screen as well to go over a little bit more stuff about crowdfunding. All right. Joseph, do you have to stop sharing your screen in order for me to share my
Oh,
screen?
sorry. Yep, you're probably right. I thought I had stopped sharing because I had turned off the presentation.
Sorry.
Had not. Thanks. There we go.
Okay. All right. Do you guys see that tab? What is crowdfunding? Perfect. Okay. So crowdfunding is probably a term that you all are pretty familiar with. You've probably seen GoFundMe's floating around, Kickstarter, that sort of thing. The difference with our crowdfunding platform is that we specialize specifically in funding community-based projects that empower communities to transform and invest in themselves. So that is kind of our bread and butter. A term that you probably or might not have heard of before, and Joseph was kind of talking about this in his presentation as well, is the concept of crowd granting. So that's basically just combining the power of this crowdfunding model with a matching grant, which is what we're seeing with Sustainable CT. So you can see here that the community crowdfund $7,500, Sustainable CT being the sponsor in this case, gives $7,500. So that is a total of $15,000 investment in your community at that point, not counting all of those other sources of funding that you might be bringing in as well. So it's very cool to see it multiply like that. So this is a model that I am, a huge advocate for a few different reasons. For one, it's super accessible. So literally anyone can create a crowdfunding campaign, champion their cause. So a change maker can be an individual like you, it can be a nonprofit, it can be, a small business, it can be a student group, it can be a community group. Literally anyone can do this. I've seen success across the board, and it's amazing. And I know that we're going to hear from Kim and Katie today, who are going to provide real insight into that as well. It's also decentralized. So through organic and grassroots support, crowdfunding provides the freedom to not be solely dependent on a bank or a grant or a few investors. Like at this point, you're really bringing the community in to advocate for your cause and your work, which is huge. It's also a great storytelling tool. And if we work together, this is something we'll talk about a lot, just figuring out how to frame your story, that narrative to also bring people onto your side, which in the case of environmental projects and composting and things like that is just so important to bring awareness around these issues on top of, funding. So I think that's another benefit. And to that same point, it also facilitates community engagement. So basically the crowd and crowdfunding serves as a super strong vetting mechanism. So your community is typically going to support the ideas or the projects that they value the most. And so, you get a lot of engagement there as well, which is great. Okay. So if you've never run a crowdfunding campaign before, the idea of doing so might seem a little bit daunting, but I'm just here to tell you that actually it's not as bad as it seems. Joseph and I are here for the entire process, which is great. So literally start to finish, we'll walk you through the whole thing. We'll talk you through developing not only your project, but your crowdfunding strategy, which is amazing. And then as you're actually going through your campaign, we will also be there on an as needed basis. So if you've got it under control, we let you run with it. And if you need a little extra support, we're also there to help and brainstorm and things like that. which is really great. So we provide technical support. I'll provide technical support specific to the website and like building the campaign page on top of crowdfunding strategy. And then of course, the one-on-one project coaching through the entire campaign is what you'll see as well. And then here is just an example of what a page looks like. If you go to patronicity.com, you can actually scroll down and there's like a little section on there. I think it's labeled Discover, and you can see a little bit more, like you can see like a whole slew of sustainable CT projects that are up and running right now and ones that have been successful. I think we have 13 live right now, Joseph. So there are quite a few to like go through and peruse and, you know, get a little bit an idea of what's going on. So that's really a good inspiration too, not only for your project, but also for whenever you kind of start looking at what it would look like to build out a campaign. So just something to keep in mind there. And yeah, that's what I've got for now. Oh, Joseph, you're muted.
Gonna be, yeah, that'll probably be a consistent theme. So thanks, Cameron. And so what I wanted to do is just shift the conversation a little bit. And maybe we'll take just a couple of minutes and pause before I introduce Kim and Katie, and just ask, are there any questions sort of about anything that Cameron or I shared about the crowdfunding website or crowdfunding process? And we'll take a couple minutes and then we'll shift over and talk directly to Kim and Katie about their experience. I see questions, hands up from B. Robbins. I don't know what your first name is. You're on.
Hi, I'm Barbara, but I think Stephanie beat me to it.
Okay, great, Stephanie. We'll get to both.
Oh, you want me to go first? It makes no difference. I just have a question about, so in addition, I'm assuming there are many ways that we're trying to get out the word out to the public, you know, far and near about this campaign, but I'm wondering if there's also somebody from the Patronicity team, so maybe the question is to Cameron, to come to a very big town event where it could be really pushed there. And I think that face-to-face connection is really powerful. And if we have a very big 4-day event, is there possible of getting that onto a schedule if that's possible to do?
Yeah, Stephanie, that's a great question. So I'm actually not based in Connecticut, which is my struggle there. Otherwise, I would 100% be there. But I actually, like, we talk a lot about events. Yeah, so number one, Joseph will absolutely be that person. He will be the smiling face and the advocate. But on top of that, we kind of talk about some of the materials that you can build out in advance to take to events like that, and using those events as a catalyst for fundraising. So you'll hear me talk about this a lot, but the biggest misconception about crowdfunding is that it happens mostly online, when in reality, it's so much on the ground and at events like you're talking about, and those conversations like phone calls and things that Joseph was mentioning earlier. So I think it's exciting to know that there is a big 4-day event where you'll be able to advocate for your project.
Yeah, but the thing is, I have maybe 20 different topics I've just got under my own thing. So I'm not going to be able to devote a lot of time, even though it's the most important project for me. If I could have someone from Sustainable CT, the matching fund, like if Joseph's available, that's going to help me a lot. I just can't cover that many topics, especially it's going to need a lot of, yeah.
Well, Stephanie, we'll talk. I think we're scheduled to chat right
Thank
after,
you.
so we can sort of figure out what might work and not work, and figure out all of the ways to work together.
Perfect, thank you.
Barbara.
Hi. So my question was, I noticed that when you were describing the amounts offered, that at the very bottom it said, as long as the funds last. So
Yes.
how big is the pool?
Well, thankfully, the pool is very generous, and we're excited about, you know, we're not in danger of running out of the funds. We put that in there. That's kind of in our legal disclaimer category of like, you know, just if something were to happen, we don't want people to think his money, this fund, the Sustainable CT Community Match Fund, is always there. You should just wait 3 years to apply. You know, no, let's sit down. If you're looking at doing a project and you'd like to start something, let's, we want to add some urgency, like, hey, let's sit down, let's talk, let's figure out how to make that happen.
Thank you. And I have a second question, and that is, would you mind going around and asking what town people are from? I'd be very interested.
Sure. So let's see here. I'm based in Manchester. So why don't we go to, actually, here's how we'll do this. If folks would be willing to share what town they're from, drop that into the chat room, and just type in what town you're from, so we have a sense of where people are located, and then we'll have a little bit of information on the side. That'll be a quick way to be able to say that rather than doing an around the horn. Perfect. Thank you. I see everyone filling in now. Awesome. So with that, what I'll do is let's shift the conversation a little bit, and I'm going to just give a brief introduction to Katie and to Kim. They've been really generous to share their experience with us today. And so I actually have their campaign pages pulled up. And so I'm just gonna give you a brief view of those. Let's go here. So Kim Price led the Chester Fair project. This is the campaign page. Kim was really successful, had over 73 people give to his campaign, actually raised more than $7,500 ultimately. Kim will probably be the first to tell you that it wasn't necessarily an easy process, but ultimately rewarding, and was able to get a lot accomplished, more than he thought would be possible for what his goals were. And then the other that we have up here, actually I can't see it because my screen is in the way. Come on. Yeah, just a little, there we go. Is Katie, and they led the Mayfair Food Waste Program. And so they also, if you notice here, their goal was $1,000. They ultimately raised close to $12,000, and also had 81 people who gave to their campaign. So I'm just going to turn this over and ask a couple just questions. So Kim and Katie, tell us, why don't we just go Kim first, and I'll ask Katie the same question. Tell us about your organization, the type of project that you ran, and why did you choose to approach Sustainable CT for your project?
Well, hi again, everybody. It's Kim Price from Chester. And we have a 3-day event in August with attendance between 8 to 10,000. An event that's actually been around since 1877. And initiating a lot of the recycling efforts on my own, it's come to the point where I had recognized that there was just a tremendous amount of trash. We had a local group years ago ask us how we could reduce the trash. And I researched it very much in general and presented it to the board of directors between 5 and 7 years ago. And just the cost took it out of the equation. It was something that the fair could not afford. It also would require an awful lot of volunteer time. So we really stopped there. And having retired a few years ago, and as a lot of people say, having nothing else to do, I decided to reinvestigate this and take a look at how I could take the financial aspect out of the equation, and who could I turn to help us with respect to funding. And that was Sustainable CT. We were registered as a town, and it was suggested by somebody on the sustainable group in town to work with you folks, and it worked out great.
Perfect. Thank you, Kim. And Katie, same question. Tell us about your organization, the type of project that you ran, and then why did you ultimately choose to work with Sustainable CT?
Thank you, Joseph. So I'm with Planet New Canaan, as is Mickey, who's also on this call, and we are a local nonprofit in New Canaan, really working on trying to reduce our local carbon footprint with initiatives such as this. And we had actually done a previous campaign with Sustainable Connecticut about 2.5 years ago to raise money to pilot a composting program at our transfer station in town, which did not have one. And that went very well. The composting program is the food scrap recycling program at the New Canaan transfer station is still going strong 2.5 years later, thanks to the pilot program that was funded by Sustainable Connecticut. And like Kim, I think removing the financial barrier for the town and for other organizations to embrace that was really critical. So Sustainable Connecticut helped us with that original pilot program. And now the town of New Canaan has carried that forward. So when, much like Kim's organization, the Mayfair is a 3-day event in New Canaan. It doesn't have quite the attendance that his does, but the tremendous amount of food waste. And so when we went to St. Mark's and asked if they would be interested in doing this again, the cost was an issue. So we thought we would apply for a Sustainable Connecticut grant to pursue this again. And as I said before, some of the infrastructure that we've created in terms of signage and so on has already been reused by the New Canaan Land Trust in an event that they held subsequent to ours. So we're hopeful that it will keep getting used by more and more organizations in town.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you very much, Katie. So crowdfunding is a different model. And actually, Katie, I think I'll come back to you first. Crowdfunding is a different model, and sourcing and reaching out to people. And you've now participated in running 2 campaigns with Sustainable CT. Can you tell us about sort of like what have you found was the most difficult part of this model? And how did you overcome that? And what was there anything that you changed, that you did differently between your first and your second campaign?
So I would say actually the process was very easy, and I thought the platform was really easy to use. Between the first campaign that we ran and this last one that we've run, certainly Joseph, you and Cameron have both been very readily available, and even your predecessor Abe was readily available, but you guys have had very specific feedback, which I think has been super helpful in terms of graphics and verbiage and so on. So that's been that's been really helpful. I'm actually super surprised, and every time people speak to me about, are there grants out there that are available, and people are always daunted by the process of applying, and I say, it is not hard. You really, I think, remove that barrier of having a difficult process, so that it was really quite easy to do. And we, contrary to what you said, or somebody was mentioning earlier about having an in-person event, because we've done most of this over COVID, almost all of our fundraising and awareness has been online. So we haven't had much experience with how to promote it face to face. So that would be something I would be curious about.
Great. Awesome. Wonderful. And Kim, so this was your first project with Sustainable CT. What did you find most difficult, and how did you overcome the challenges and barriers that you did face in the process of ultimately hosting a successful campaign?
Well, I can't say it was horrible, but it was definitely out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
It's a different arena. As Cameron and I had spoken a number of times, she was wonderful to keep the encouragement going, because it was challenging. And if you think about it, my request on the grant was for $10,000, and it would have been a heck of a lot easier, Joseph, if you just gave us a check for $10,000 and just let me run with it. But it doesn't work like that. And in hindsight, I'm glad that it doesn't, because the whole point of crowdfunding is getting out to the community. And the momentum that we were able to gather from like-minded people, it was remarkable. And that's why we even exceeded the increased grant amount. We started at 10,000. We ended at 15,000 with a co-funded or crowdfunded grant, and we ended up with a total just over 18,000. So, I mean, it was put together. There were a lot of lessons that were learned, and I learned them quickly. We began the beginning of April and went through till the end of May. And I learned very quickly that unless you have a team that is very focused and has very distinct goals as to how they're going to achieve raising money, plan on doing it yourself is really what it comes down to. And that was the approach I had to take. And, you know, fortunately, it worked out okay.
Yeah, perfect. So then just one last question that I think is really useful in helping kind of structure people's thinking around this. Kim, you shared one piece of advice is really have a strong team and build a strong team, and really make sure that the team is up for the commitment of the process as much as you are. And that's something that we've, Cameron and I have both recognized can make the process of the crowdfunding seem much easier or more difficult, is the level of teamwork that you have around you. But I guess, Kim, kind of going back to you a little bit, is that the piece of advice that you would offer to prospective project leaders, or is there another piece of advice that you would say, oh, that's, if I was going to say one thing, here's what I would tell a prospective project leader, what they should do to be successful and what they should do to make this process smoother for themselves?
I think the biggest challenge with any volunteer event is creating a team. I was a team of one, still am a team of one. And it really does come down to your interests, your confidence, your abilities to get out and just get in front of people, whether it's family, friends, or local businesses. But it does take a lot of work. I mean, fortunately, I was in sales for 4 years with the same company, and that, I think, it kind of hardened you to the fact that you do here know a lot. But then again, as I said, there are a lot of like-minded people out there that want to support these type of efforts, and I'm just glad that people came through the way they did.
Great, awesome. And then Katie, you've run 2 projects now. You've had a little bit of experience from the first to the second. You know, was there a piece of advice that you would say, whoa, this made a huge difference between the first and the second? Or, you know, what would you share, sort of like, hey, if you're looking at running a campaign and you're a prospective or a new campaign project leader, what would be the piece of advice that you would really share to help people be successful?
I think that, well, I think as you progress with projects, they do sort of build on each other. So they do get easier. I think once you've introduced composting and food scraps in one area, it builds on each other. But I would say in particular, we really relied on partners, online partners within our community. So we did a lot of fundraising awareness through Facebook and Instagram. Planet Nutrition is a registered nonprofit, so we have, you know, a Facebook site and an Instagram site. So we were able to share those with, for example, New Canaan Moms, which is a very frequently used Facebook site in New Canaan. And so partnering with Facebook sites like that really, I think helped us, as opposed to, you know, any one of us just sending out emails or something like that. Just really sort of leveraging the reach of those Facebook sites, the local Facebook sites, really helped us.
Great, great, great advice. Great advice. Perfect. Well, Kim and Katie, I just really want to thank you both for really being willing to step up to the table and share your perspective and some of your experience. And yeah, I just both of your campaigns were really successful, and it's great to see. Even though, Katie, your project for Mayfair was smaller, it's really great because you were able to garner support from 81 different individuals. And I think part of what people respond to, and Kim had 73 people that gave online, and part of what people respond to in this challenge grant, in this community match fund granting program, is that $5 or $10 or $15, whatever people are able to give and are willing to give, makes a difference to the project. And like one of the things that I like to say is, especially in this day and age, where else can you ensure that you have 100% return on your investment? People will tell you, oh, crypto, or not really. The place where you can really make an investment and make a difference is right in your community. And the Sustainable CT Match Fund is really structured around supporting that. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and just wanted to leave time from now until 1 o'clock or whenever for folks to ask questions and give us feedback on kind of what's on your mind, or what you saw as being really important. Also, I want to make sure that folks know I have a open calendar, and pretty much anytime you want to find some time to have a conversation, we encourage everything to start with a conversation. I have a link that I can put that I'll send out to folks, and you can find a time anytime you want to chat with me. If you don't feel like you're getting enough of an answer in this conversation, we can set up another time to chat later on. But I see a question and a hand up from Barbara.
Hi, just a quick one, and that is, you have your, I guess it's an email and a phone up, but Cameron, do you have a same one, or is it a different contact information?
Yeah, I will put my contact information in the chat right now, so you have it.
Thank you.
Yep. And you can start, you can contact Cameron, but also once we have a conversation, Cameron will be one of the first people that I'll plug you in with once we have had a conversation around what the structure of your campaign and your project is going to be. I try to save Cameron's time for really focusing on, once the project is really ready to be built and you're starting to move your project forward, then I'll tag Cameron in.
Okay, that helps. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph, there was also a question or a couple questions in the chat from Michaela that I can answer really fast.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so Michaela, answer your question, what should the size of a team ideally be? So I actually have a crowdfunding strategy guide that I share with you, and Joseph will share it with you as well whenever you get started with the campaign. But as you kind of heard from Kim, the spectrum of Kim working as an individual, and then Katie, who has a whole nonprofit, it can be literally any size. So we have everything broken down into a series of tasks. So we usually look at, ideally maybe 3 to 4 people on your team if possible. Absolutely not a requirement. And it is definitely more difficult if, you're operating on your own, as Kim learned, but it is not impossible. Team responsibilities are going to look like managing donations coming in and thank you notes, doing outreach, social media outreach, in-person outreach, looking at events, just someone kind of managing the whole thing from start to finish, who kind of has an idea of where everyone else is. So there are obviously more specifics to get into with that, but that just kind of gives you an idea of the breakdown of tasks. And then in terms of how long campaigns usually run, we look at a 30 to 60 day period. 30 is more, number one, if you're operating on a quick timeline, if you have an event or something that is creeping up and you need a shorter timeline. But we usually try to reserve the 30, closer to 30 days. for if you have had the time to lay the groundwork for some of those donations in advance. So that's a huge part of it. So if you're kind of, expecting to have a lot of those big conversations with donors during your campaign, I usually recommend that people look at more of like a 45 to 60 day campaign, just to make sure you have like all the time you need to make that happen. Does that answer everything, Michaela? Okay.
Perfect. And then one thing that's also really useful to think about in terms of your timeline is something that you can think about doing is using events. So, Stephanie, what you were thinking about sort of having events that are going on, but many times folks will use events and tabling at events and preparing sort of like a handout or a flyer that has the QR code for your campaign website, and being able to say, hey, this is our project, this is our initiative. If you'd like to give, here's this campaign link. You just point your phone at it. It pops right into your patronicity page and people can give that way. And, that's a way of making a direct connection with a lot of people when you're out and about and actually, in real life, not necessarily just online or on Zoom. What other questions are out there? What are people thinking about? Are there projects that people have in mind that you have in mind? If you're willing to share those, what are some of your ideas? Go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah, would you, I was just sending an email to Stephanie because she's closest to me and I didn't know if we could join up and do something together.
Great.
But last year I got a Love Your Block from City of Hartford grant to start a composting project. I got tumblers through the grant and we got a second grant. I got more tumblers. It turns out using the tumblers is a very limited way to do it. And since then I've been, doing a lot of research and I have found a system that I really want to use. And I have someone who will do some training and that kind of thing. I wondered if some of the money would go to hiring this person to do like a short-term training for whatever people I can get together to continue this, because I want to make it bigger. I found out by having the tumblers that I'm limited to how much I can put in. And so I had to sort of stop at a certain level and say, I can't take anybody else right now. I didn't really say it that way, but so I want to expand. I do need some land to do it on. So I'm working with one location right now, but I'm not sure that's going to work out. But so I didn't know if Stephanie wanted to, connect up, but that's sort of what I'm in the middle of. I've done it for a year now. And I found, practically through experience, what some of the limitations are, and that it really has to be a larger system than what I was going to do in the beginning. I'm trying to include the community as much as possible. And my ultimate goal is to show the city of Hartford that the city of Hartford needs to do this. And this will be the pilot project that they look at and say, oh, it's possible. People will do it. They are interested, so anyway, that's what I'm doing.
Well, that's great. And Stephanie would be a great resource. Stephanie has really spearheaded a huge array of composting initiatives and projects in Bloomfield, and has done just a great job of sort of pulling in a lot of resources and partners and partnerships. So she'd be a great resource. But Barbara, to kind of thinking about your project, like campaigns and getting the word out to people and providing education and educational resources is perfect. That aligns very well with Laura. Thanks for being here. Aligns very well with the Sustainable CT Match Fund.
And I'm also part of the neighborhood association. I'm on the board of directors for that. So we do have a lot of outreach possibilities through that. And I'm the secretary of the Green Committee. So,
Awesome.
we have things that are in progress now, and I just really like to take this next step.
Awesome. Perfect. Other folks, what projects are you thinking about, or what brought you to the call today? And what have been some of the things that you're having as takeaways?
Do you want me to share a little?
Sure, Stephanie, please.
Brief. So I believe in stealing ideas. I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. This is something that works. We had ideas, but I also believe in like sharing on. So Barbara, I would love for us to meet. I'm creating a team actually to work on these approaches. As Joseph said, we're working on 5 different approaches, and 2 of them are going to be sort of led by the hauler that are voluntary, but we're selecting the residences. The 3 approaches I'll be creating this team to work with are the voluntary right from the outset. So these are people who already want to do organic waste diversion programs. They know they don't really need a whole lot of education. We're expecting high levels of participation and very low levels of contamination because of these people. So those are the 3. There are 3 approaches within that area that I'm going to be working on, and the patronicity campaign we hope to do is really to get the money where it's needed for that. So in a nutshell, we're looking to do a partnership with Blue Earth Composting for curbside pickup, but along with that, people who are able to do backyard composting, we want to encourage them to do that first and foremost, because transportation costs money. If they can keep it on site and they can get the confidence to do backyard composting, that's the very first thing we need to do. Second thing, people who don't have a backyard or not comfortable with that, maybe because of animals or whatever, vermicomposting, fantastic for children as well. So those are 3 approaches. I'm also partnering with a group that does workforce development to recycle pallets. Hopefully they'll be able to make some of the compost bins for us. So that sort of collaborative effort as well. So that's what I'm looking to do. So whoever wants to join, come on board.
Great, perfect.
I just have to jump off for another meeting in about a minute or 2, sorry.
No problem. Thanks a lot, Stephanie, and I'll talk to you too. Great. Well, I want to just thank everyone for being here. Kim, Katie, thank you for sharing your perspective. Barbara, thank you for asking your questions. Stephanie, Mark, and Katie, really great to meet you. Michaela, nice to meet you as well. Well, and again, I put my email address in the chat box. And if you have any questions or you're thinking about a project, even if you're thinking about a project a year from now or whenever, please, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Please reach out to me, and I will look forward to chatting with you about what you're looking at doing, and then hoping to set you up for success down the road. But thanks everyone for being here. Sabina, good to see you. Thanks for participating. And I will look forward to chatting with you all again soon.
Thank you. Thanks for putting this on.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Cameron.
Take care.